This is a Nightline Friday night special.
All right, they're going into the house. They are walking into the house.
The pursuit. The arrest. The two suspects now in hand, believed to have ties to a militia.
I've been over there, I've watched them make bombs, small stuff. I mean, nothing that would do any devastation like this.
They're kind of in the mindset that there's an act of war against the people. And in an act of war, all is fair.
Tonight, the bombing in Oklahoma. The fear that investigators have uncovered just the tip of the iceberg. This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel. The story becomes even more unsettling and disturbing with each passing day. The suggestion these past couple of days that some alien terrorist group might be responsible didn't diminish the horror in Oklahoma City, but today's developments pointing toward homegrown terrorists makes it seem in some ways even worse. You will hear a little later in this program from a couple of men in Decker, Michigan. They are neighbors of the three men who are now being questioned in connection with the bombing. What they told me earlier this evening, having to do with experiments in bomb making and a passionate anger against the federal government for its actions against the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas 2 years back, is circumstantial but telling. You will also hear from the commander of a group calling itself the Michigan Militia. He makes clear that such grievances about Waco are widely held. But as I say, we'll come to all of that a little later. To begin with, Chris Bury in Oklahoma City brings us up to date on this day's developments.
As night fell, 68 was the confirmed death toll. Another 4 bodies were discovered tonight in a building across the street from the federal building by rescuers using tiny television cameras. The winds here are picking up tonight, and safety is a real concern for rescue workers. On this day, the only comfort was the welcome news that the FBI had apparently cracked the case. This morning, their hope for finding the living all but gone, rescue teams turned their attention to removing the dead, including more children still entombed in the wreckage. The daycare director asked parents to bring in birth certificates with footprints to help in the identification.
I'm lost for words. I don't have any information for anybody, any names or anything. I just want everyone to be fully aware that everybody is doing everything within their power and their ability to get any of these loved ones found.
Keith Coverdale's 2 sons were dropped off at daycare Wednesday morning.
I'm a realist. I'm always going to hold some sort of hope until I see my kids or else hear it from the medical examiner. But in all reality, there's very slim chance that my kids are still, that they lived through that blast.
Melvin Howell's wife was a teacher in that daycare center. This morning, he got word her body had been found.
I just wanted them to find her,
You just wanted to know?
Yeah, if she was dead or alive. That was the biggest suffering I had. It's didn't know her, not knowing.
To signal they shared in the grief, morning commuters turned on their headlights. In Washington, President Clinton, announcing plans to attend a Sunday memorial service in Oklahoma City, had a special word for the children.
My message to the children is that this was an evil thing, and the people who did it were terribly, horribly wrong. We will catch them and we will punish them.
I was kind of scared because I thought he was going to come closer to my neighborhood and do the same thing.
At the Nichols Elementary School in Oklahoma City, children were making cards and sending messages for the rescue workers.
You're doing very well helping patients get well. My heart is pounding with joy. Love, Brittany.
By mid-morning, as forensic teams scoured Oklahoma City streets for the tiniest shreds of evidence, the FBI agent in charge sounded a newly optimistic note.
We are very, very confident that we're going to move rapidly forward with the progress of this investigation and hopefully move to a successful conclusion.
At the scene of the crime, where crews dismantled the federal building brick by brick, the pace was painstakingly slow, but the investigation was breaking fast. By midday, the first of several stunning developments.
One suspect, according to our sources, is in custody now. And we can also give you a bit of a hint now as to where the government appears to be focusing its investigation on some of the what are called right-wing, white supremacist groups in various parts of the country.
That suspect, 27-year-old Tim McVeigh, the crew-cut John Doe #1 in the FBI sketch, had been stopped for speeding in this Mercury Marquis 60 miles north of Oklahoma City about 90 minutes after the bombing. State police took him into custody in nearby Perry, Oklahoma. As ABC's John McCarthy reports, McVeigh almost got away.
Normally, he would have been out in 24 hours. And it was not until this morning that the FBI happened to ask local authorities in Perry, Oklahoma, who is this man who you are holding, that local officials finally realized who they had, John Doe #1.
This small town has been transformed into the center of the nation's largest criminal investigation.
Just as the media descended on the Noble County Courthouse in Perry, Oklahoma, federal agents began swarming around a farmhouse in Decker, Michigan, the home of James Nichols, a former member of an extremist paramilitary group known as the Michigan Militia.
All right, they're going into the house. They are walking into the house.
Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull the trigger or jerk the trigger. Squeeze the trigger.
The rifle-toting militia, whose members train in camouflage fatigues, share an opposition to gun control and a disdain for the federal government.
When our own Army and Navy decides to stand against the Constitution of the United States of America, we'll call on a higher court.
The Michigan militia was formed last April. Like similar groups across the country, it grew partly as a response to the federal raid at Waco, Texas.
The Michigan militia, like militias throughout the country, have a central tenet. They feel like the federal government is overzealous and out of control and is overreaching and is trampling the rights of citizenry, and that only an armed citizenry can keep the national authority in check.
In Washington, Attorney General Janet Reno confirmed the arrest of Timothy McVeigh, the John Doe #1. Reno hinted at a wider conspiracy.
I remind everyone that John Doe #2 remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. There is a strong likelihood that other persons are involved in this tragedy as well.
The man originally identified as John Doe #2, Terry Nichols, surrendered this afternoon in Harrington, Kansas. The Justice Department now describes him as a potential witness. Late today at the White House, President Clinton underscored the Attorney General's assertion U.S. officials would seek the ultimate punishment.
As I said on Wednesday, justice for these killers will be certain, swift, and severe. We will find them, we will convict them, and we will seek the death penalty for them.
Tonight in Perry, Oklahoma, suspect Tim McVeigh, among the most wanted men in American history, was escorted from the courthouse. Agents led McVeigh to a waiting car and a convoy to a local airport for a short helicopter ride to Tinker Air Force Base near Oklahoma City. As McVeigh was being moved, his father was taken in for questioning in Buffalo, New York. Tonight at Tinker Air Force Base, McVeigh was arraigned on a charge of malicious damage to federal property and taken away in a convoy of flashing lights to the El Reno Correctional Center, just a few miles from the building that stands as a tomb for some of those he may be accused of killing in one of this country's most terrible crimes. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Oklahoma City.
There is no question about the identity of the man the FBI has been calling John Doe #1. He is, as you have heard, Tim McVeigh, and he has been formally charged. What is not so clear is the identity of the man known as John Doe #2. Tim McVeigh has given as his place of residence a farm in Decker, Michigan, belonging to two brothers, James and Terry Nichols. Both of them are being questioned by authorities tonight, although James Nichols, we have just learned, has now been released. But those who know both those men say that neither one of them looks anything like the sketch of the man identified as John Doe #2. If and when we learn any more to clarify the issue, we'll let you know. A short time ago, we spoke to Mark Gibson, the district attorney handling the McVeigh case in Perry, Oklahoma. He told us the story of how Tim McVeigh was first captured and came very near to being released. Mr. Gibson, as I understand the story, you were about 1/2 an hour away from being a very embarrassed assistant district attorney indeed.
Well, I wouldn't say embarrassed, Mr. Koppel, but we all got very fortunate.
What happened?
We were prepared to have a bond hearing for Mr. McVeigh this morning about 9:30 a.m., and at that time I was finishing up another hearing before that, and as we were finishing up the last hearing prior to Mr. McVeigh, the sheriff received word from the federal officials that they wanted to hold Mr. McVeigh, that he was the suspect in the bombing.
When you say you were going to hold a bond hearing, if he'd been able to come up with, what was it, a $5,000 bond, he would have walked?
Yes, sir. In fact, if he had come up with $500 in cash, he would have made bond today.
Is there any reason to believe that he had the money or was likely to get the money?
Yes, he told the judge that he had $2,000 in cash. Now, I can't verify that myself, but that's what he said.
Why was it that he was taken into custody in the first place? Can you just explain how that happened?
Yes, sir. Trooper Hanger stopped him for not having a tag on the car he was driving, and at the time of approaching Mr. McVeigh in the car, then he discovered a loaded Glock 9mm in a shoulder holster. And so Mr. McVeigh was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon in a car.
And when was that?
That was at 10:20 a.m. on Wednesday morning, which was just 75 minutes after the bombing.
So, in effect, you have had this man in your jail since just a couple of hours after the bombing.
That's correct.
The country has been plastered with pictures of McVeigh, and I don't want to make this sound as though I'm badgering you, because I don't think I could identify anyone from one of those pictures either. But as you look at that handbill now, and you look at Mr. McVeigh, is there a similarity?
Yes, there is a similarity. I had not actually seen Mr. McVeigh yet at the time that we were notified that he was their suspect. Trooper Hanger and I discussed it afterwards, the arresting officer, and we both agreed that although he looked similar to that, neither one of us would have picked him out and said, yeah, that's the man they're looking for.
Now, had he been cross-examined in any way? Had anyone talked to him?
I visited with him briefly before the bond hearing, and then he visited with the judge a little bit. But that was primarily about where he lived and what he did and where he was going, that sort of thing.
And what kind of an impression did he make on you?
Very calm. In fact, that's the same impression that the trooper had of him when he arrested him. He was not nervous. He was not upset about being arrested or about being charged. He said he had never been arrested for anything before, but very militaristic. Everything was yes, sir, no, sir, speak when spoken to, and standing erect. Very polite, very relatively soft-spoken.
Again, and I just want to ask you one more time, as everyone in the jailhouse now thinks about what happened, I mean, here the whole country is looking for this person, and the picture has been distributed about as widely as a picture can be distributed. How does that sort of thing happen?
Well, I just think that, as I said, even now, having seen again the picture and Mr. McVeigh, I would not necessarily think I'm going to pick up the phone and call somebody. I think that's the guy they're looking for. There is a similarity, but certainly not an incredible likeness. And it's just fate and pure luck that we did, in fact, hold him long enough that the federal officials were able to determine they wanted him.
Mr. Gibson, I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Koppel.